The snows came early that autumn, as though the old gods themselves wished to cleanse the realm before winter could claim it fully. On the ridge above the King's Road, flurries drifted like pale embers, stinging the horses' flanks and frosting the black iron antlers upon King Robert Baratheon's helm. Beneath the fur-trimmed mantle of Shadowcat, the king's breath steamed in ragged plumes, but his eyes, blue and iron-bright, held the wild gleam of a man who had refused the stranger's summons and now rode northward in defiance of every mortal reckoning. Weeks ago he had lain in his bed in Maegor's holdfast, gut torn by a boar's tusk and soul drowning in dream wine. Yet he had risen, healed by pain and stubborn fury, only to hear the direwolf prophecy whispered by a dying ranger of the Night's Watch. When the stag stands beside the wolf beneath a sky of falling stars, the dead shall howl and the living shall answer or perish. The words coiled round Robert's heart like a mailed fist. Beneath his cuirass he felt the rawness of the half-healed scar, each jolt of the horse reminding him that life was a loan bought at terrible interest. He would not squander the coin. If the gods had spared him, it was for this march, to set his great hammer against whatever terror stirred beyond the wall and to stand beside the sons of his oldest friend. Ned Stark. 7 hells, Ned. Why did I ever let you ride south? Ahead, Ser Barristan Selmy signaled a halt. The old knight's white cloak snapped like a banner in the wind as he pointed toward a rise where snow-clad sentinel pines crowded a crumbled watchtower. Smoke curled thinly from a brazier within, an advance camp of Stark outriders. Flanking Barristan rode Lord Renly, green cloak rippling, cheeks flushed with the cold and the thrill of the march. Behind them thundered 5,000 armored Baratheon men-at-arms, the gold and black of Storm's End mingling with the crowned stag of the royal standard. More columns trailed farther south. Ser Kevin Lannister's escort, dour and silent since the Queen's arrest. Lord Glover's levy from Deepwood Motte. The baggage trains, the supplies Varys swore would last a season. It would have to suffice. The King's spymaster remained in King's Landing, webbing the capital with whispers, while Grand Maester Pycelle sent ravens squawking of long winters and unnatural portents. Robert spat. Portents be damned. He would believe steel and sinew, comrades and courage. They rode the last mile in silence, broken only by the chime of mail and the crunch of hooves upon frozen earth. At the tower yard, torches sprang to life. Out strode Ser Roderick Castle, whiskers rimed with frost, and 7 bless Robb Stark himself, cloak of gray fur clasped by a bronze direwolf. He was taller than Robert remembered, all long bones and quiet resolve, Eddard's very image. When the boy knelt, Robert dismounted stiffly, waves of pain lancing from hip to rib, and pulled him up into a crushing embrace. "No kneeling," Robert growled. "Not for a son of Ned Stark, and never again for me. We stand together, wolf and stag." Robb's answering smile was brief, shadowed by fears far older than his years. "Winterfell thanks you, your grace. The North thanks you. But the road is long, and rumors ride faster. My lord father awaits at Moat Cailin. We may need every sword you can muster." Robert glanced at the sky. The last orange splinter of sun dipped beneath bruised clouds. Night would fall hard and cold. He clapped Robb's shoulder. "Then let's drink once, sleep little, and ride till the horses collapse. The dead won't slow for us, boy." In the tower's gutted hall, they crowded round trestle tables, wolf banners draped beside stag shields. The meal was salt pork, hard bread, and a cask of Stormlander brown that tasted of burnt chestnuts. Yet Robert drained it as though it were arbor gold. Around him conversation eddied. Tales of white shadows sighted near the Queen's Crown, entire villages emptied overnight, a giant direwolf pack seen coursing east of Long Lake. Each rumor fanned the ember in Robert's chest. Dread, yes, but also purpose. For too long he had wallowed in wine and court intrigue, forgetting the iron in his own spine. Now every heartbeat reminded him of the spear-shaft heft of his warhammer, newly reforged by Tobo Mott from Valyrian steel gifted by Euron Greyjoy's uneasy tribute. Stag's Lair, men were calling it. Soon it would have truer prey. Robb excused himself to speak with his outriders. Renly lingered, green eyes dancing in torchlight. "You look more alive on campaign than you ever did upon the throne, brother." he said softly. Robert snorted. The throne is a siege tower without wheels. A man rots sitting still. He wiped foam from his beard. Keep an eye on King's Landing while I'm gone. Ser Barristan rides with me, and I trust no one else to herd those vipers. Renly's smile faltered. And the Queen? Cersei'll face trial when I return, if the Seven don't strike her down first. Robert's gaze hardened. She and her cub Joffrey are under guard in the Red Keep. Stannis holds Dragonstone, muttering of rightful heirs. He shook his head. I'll settle the crown's mess after I settle this realm's doom. One battle at a time. That night's sleep came fitful. Robert dreamed of a pale forest, where a direwolf of monstrous size stalked beneath a bleeding moon. Its eyes were twin blue suns, and its breath froze the grass into glass shards. Robert followed, warhammer hefted, but the beast paused at a clearing ringed by weirwoods, their faces weeping sap as red as wounds. A stag stood there, antlers tangled with torn banners. Its side rent open, yet it did not fall. It pushed forward, throat low, until its blood mingled with the direwolf's foam in the snow. Then came the boom of distant drums, murmur of thousands of dead voices chanting a single word he could not discern, until he woke, drenched and trembling, the roar still echoing in his skull. Dawn found the king already armoring. Steel seemed heavier than before the boar, yet his limbs answered. Pain was merely another weight to bear. They pushed north at first light. The King's Road narrowed where ancient barrows crowded its verge. Snow thickened, swallowing will ruts, forcing the baggage wagons into grueling slog. Even so, Robert urged the vanguard faster. Each league closer to Moat Cailin was another league stolen from the forces gathering beyond the wall. Forces he scarcely dared imagine. 2 days' ride brought them to the Neck, where mists slithered through twisted pines and the air stank of peat. It was here the ravens found them. Messages from Castle Black, sealed with the black wax of the Lord Commander. Robert broke the first. My king, Bowen Marsh had written in a crabbed hand. The dead grow bold. Cold winds carve the wall. We have sent rangers south to seek aid from every house, but few men return. We beg your swords and your haste. Another letter bore Jon Snow's name, words few but urgent. Your Grace, we ride for Winterfell to rally the north. The long night stirs. My brothers and I will stand, but alone we will fail. Robb read over Robert's shoulder, jaw clenched. My father must be half mad with worry. Robert folded the parchments. He'll feel better once he sees our columns, and the watch will find we're not as late as they feared. He raised a gauntlet fist. Hear me, double ranks, spears forward. We make Moat Cailin by dusk or die trying. They did not die, though 3 horses lamed, a wagon overturned, and 1 Stormlander drowned when a rotted plank gave way over a causeway pool. At dusk, towers of black stone loomed through fog. Moat Cailin, ancient and ruined, yet still a choke point none could bypass. Firelight flickered on its ramparts. Within stood Ned Stark. Robert dismounted before the gatehouse. For a heartbeat the 2 old friends stared. The one gaunt, gray-flecked, cloak stiff with rime. The other broad as a frost-gnarled oak, beard touched by fresh snow. Then Ned laughed, the first true laugh Robert had heard in months. They clasped arms, foreheads touching like brothers reunited at war's end. No words were needed. Only when Ned stepped back did Robert note the haunted set to his friend's eyes. Winter has teeth this year, Ned said quietly. Come inside. There is news you must hear before we ride farther. In the cramped hall, hounds slumbered by the hearth while wind clawed the shutters. Around a table strewn with maps waited Lady Catelyn, Maester Luwin, Great John Umber, and gods, Arya, lean as a shadow with needle at her belt, eyes too old for her summers. Catelyn inclined her head. Your Grace. She looked thinner, but the steel in her spine had not bent. Across the table, Maester Luwin brandished a charcoal rubbing of runes. Found carved upon a dead man's shield south of Last Hearth, he said. It speaks of a pact bound by blood and frostfire, the direwolf and the stag standing sentinel at the wall to turn the darkness aside. Robert traced the rune with a thumb. Prophecy again. He met Ned's eyes. Then we ride to Castle Black together, you and I, as we should have ridden years ago. And what of the realm? Caitlin asked. King's Landing is a tinderbox. If word spreads that both of you march north, the south may rise in chaos. Robert shrugged. Let Renly light the torches and Stannis bang the drums. I care not for crowns if there's no realm left to rule. Ned's mouth twitched, a ghost of a smile. Still the same Robert. I am. He squared his shoulders. Yet something in me changed when that tusk ripped my belly. I saw a cold beyond fire, and I swore, bleeding in my own filth, that if the gods spared me, I would give them a true king at war again. Ned placed a finger on the map where the wall stretched like a scar. So we ride, but steel alone may not be enough. There are magics in the north older than our houses. We must honor them or perish by them. For magic, Robert said, hefting his hammer. I have iron. Yet in his heart he wondered if even Stag's Lair could break the bones of winter. The column set out before dawn, adding 2,000 Northmen. Umber great axes, Karstark cavalry, even a scattering of mountain clans in rag-wrapped tartans. Snow thickened to white walls on either side of the road. When they made camp by the Weeping Water, Ned called council. Scouts reported whites glimpsed shambling through Wolfswood glens, wildlings fleeing south with tales of an army of ice marching behind a horned king, and a shimmering aurora that hung above the frostfangs like a rent veil. Each report tugged the noose tighter. You would think us frightened children, Great John rumbled after the third tale. The North has faced winters 100 times and held. Ned's voice cut like clear water over stone. Not this winter. He unrolled a fresh skin. Drawn on it was a circle of blunted triangles, a jagged crown. This mark was burned on a white's forehead. Bran saw it in a dream the same hour. Robert frowned. Your boy's green sight again? Yes, Ned said evenly. His wolf eyes the future, and this symbol bled fire across his vision. Call it sorcery if you will. I call it warning. Robert studied the mark. A cold prickle traced his scar. He tightened his grip on the hammer haft. Then we ride harder. For 6 days they hacked through drifts, forded ice-choked creeks, and skirted abandoned villages where doors banged in the wind and snow sifted through broken roofs like ash. At Queen's Crown they found the bodies. For rangers, throats dark with frostbite, eyes blue as desert skies. Each had been bound by his own cloak to wooden stakes. A ring of charred symbols burned around them. Arya, riding at the rear with the baggage, slipped from her horse and knelt by one corpse. Robert watched her lips move, perhaps a prayer or perhaps a promise. When she stood, her small face bore a fury to shame kings. Bury them, Robert ordered, under stone and salt the ground. They moved on. That night Robert found sleep impossible. He paced the perimeter, breath clouding lantern flame. At the camp's edge, he discovered Arya practicing forms with needle by torchlight, water dancer spins and thrusts so swift they blurred. Your father know you dance with death after dark? Robert asked. Arya didn't lower her blade. The dark's already dancing with us, your grace. She parried an invisible blow, pivoted. When they come, I won't be caged. Robert thought of the prophecy, the direwolf and the stag. Perhaps the gods cared little whether the wolf was lord or daughter, so long as the blood remained true. He nodded once. Keep at it. When the dead rise, stab them with fire or dragonglass. Steel alone won't do. I know. She met his gaze, fearless. I've been reading old scrolls with Samwell Tarly. He says Valyrian steel shatters the night's magic. Robert hefted Stag's Lair. This'll kiss them goodnight, then. But as he turned away, he wondered. Would it? Castle Black's wind-carved towers emerged from a snow squall on the 7th day. Ravens spiraled above like black smoke. Upon the ramparts, horn blasts echoed, a welcome tinged with desperation. The gates groaned open, and Robert led the charge inside. Jon Snow awaited in the yard with Bowen Marsh and a scattering of brothers. Too few. Jon's sable cloak was ragged, eyes shadow-ringed. He bowed briefly. "Your Grace, Lord Stark, you came." Robert dismounted into knee-deep snow. "Would have come sooner if the South weren't full of fools." He clasped the boy's arm. "You look your father's son." Jon's half-smile vanished as he surveyed the ragged column. "Even with these numbers, the wall is thin. We lost Eastwatch 3 nights past. Ravens never came. Only fire upon the horizon, and screams we heard on the wind." A silence fell, heavy as the snow itself. Robert felt its weight settle on his shoulders. He looked up. 500 feet of ice glimmered like moonstone under a pale sun. Somewhere beyond, an enemy amassed. Ned spoke first. "Show us the breach. We'll seal it or die trying." Jon met his Lord Father's eyes. "I hope it's enough." Robert's laughter rumbled, frost smoke curling from his beard. "It will be enough, boy. For when the stag and the wolf stand side by side, prophecy says the dead will howl, and the living will answer." He raised Stag's lair high, Valyrian patterns rippling like dark water. "Let them come. We hold here. We hold tonight. And tomorrow, we hunt the cold into its grave." His shout echoed off ice and stone, answered by a chorus of swords rasping free, shields hammering shields, voices roaring oaths both northern and stormborn. Yet through the clamor Robert heard a distant sound, faint as memory. The wail of a horn far beyond the eastern shadows, low and dreadful, sending a tremor through the wall itself. 3 blasts, ancient signal for others. The Direwolf prophecy had not lied. The dead had come. Now it was time to teach winter what it meant to fear a king reborn. Snow fell thicker by the hour, veiling the world in white silence broken only by the wall's groan. Jon and Bowen guided Robert and Ned along ice tunnels lit by sputtering torches, every step echoing like drums. At the Eastwatch stair they found the breach, a ragged maw of melted ice rimmed by black frost, wide enough to drive wagons through. The air tasted of ashes and cold iron. Tracks led away into frozen forest, hoofprints of horses long dead. Ned knelt, brushed the ice. This wound in the wall was wrought by fire hot enough to eat stone, yet it left no scorch. "Dragon fire," Jon whispered, "or something colder." Robert ground teeth. "If the enemy has dragons, we'll break their skulls same as Aegon's whelps." He slammed the haft of Stag's lair against the ice. "Get me pitch, rope, stone. We close this gap before dusk." They labored while winds howled overhead. Northmen hauled blocks of ice, Watch brothers poured quenching water, masons hammered iron stakes. By dark, the breach was half sealed, yet the air beyond shimmered with pale witchlight. At moonrise the first white attacked, a spearman in cracked Targaryen armor, eyes burning blue, moving like a puppet jerking on wolfgut strings. Men cried warnings, arrows snapped. The thing clambered up the half-built wall, only to meet Robert's hammer in a spray of bone. It rose once more, he crushed it again. On the third blow, Stagslayer's Valyrian edge severed skull from spine, and the corpse burst into frost smoke. Cheers rose, but died as 50 more shapes emerged from the trees. Winter's true war had begun. Robert barked orders. Robb Stark formed a shield wall, Grachan's axes guarding the flanks, while Jon Snow and Bowen surged along the parapet with barrels of fire glass. Dragonglass arrowheads Samwell Tarly had unearthed in the Fist's old cairns. When the first volley loosed, black arrowheads struck whites and burst them into seething dust. But for each that fell, another lumbered forward, limbs barbed with ice, mouths locked in eternal screams. Hours blurred into a frenzy of steel and sorcery. Robert fought at the breach, hammer singing, each impact ringing like a bell of doom. Pain knifed his scar. Blood soaked his vest, but he did not yield. Beside him Ned moved with lake-still precision, longsword ice severing dead flesh like silk. Renly's green cloaks reinforced the rear. Barristan's white cloak shone crimson with ichor not his own. Arya flitted through gaps, Needle a silver whisper that left shattered wrist bones in her wake. Then Snowfall parted, revealing shapes taller than men astride armored dead horses. White walkers, eyes glowing shards of heartfrost. One raised a spear of glass that caught the moonlight in kaleidoscope blues. pointed at Robert. The king felt a cold deeper than winter bite his lungs. Here, he knew, stood the test of every oath he had broken, every sorrow he had drowned in wine. This was the debt he owed for living past the boar. He roared, hammer raised high. The direwolf howled somewhere behind him. Stag and wolf stood, and beneath falling stars of snow, the dead began to howl in answer. Snow hissed against the ice as the breach knifed with moon-pale light, and Robert Baratheon felt the wall tremble beneath his boots like a living beast shivering in fear. Breath steaming, he anchored himself at the gap, hammer half-braced against his thigh, while Ned Stark stood to his left, blade ice rippling dull silver in the dark. A line of iron-shod shields curved behind them, Stormlanders, Northmen, and black-cloaked brothers alike, all packed shoulder to shoulder, gauntlets whitening upon leather grips as the White Walkers advanced. The enemy rode upon skeletal destriers whose hooves never touched snow. They drifted, legs lost in mist, blue eyes shining through delicate helms of rime-carved bone. No breath clouded from their mouths. No heartbeat stirred their crystal torsos. At their fore, one taller than the rest lifted a sword fine as moonlight, its edge whispering like distant screams, and pointed toward Robert as though naming him for execution. Wind howled across frozen stones, lifting cloaks like torn banners. For a heartbeat the world stilled. Hammer poised, stag and wolf statues under night. Then a single horn blast rent the air, rattling rafters and spines. The line surged. Baratheon Selmy bellowed for the king's guard around Robert to hold formation. But the whites behind the White Walkers moved faster than any living man, spindly limbs jerking, jaws cracking like dry timber. Arrows hissed from the ramparts. Dragonglass tips exploded white skulls into powder. Yet where one corpse collapsed, three more clambered across it, claws scratching stone in frantic scramble. Robert met the first with a roar. Stag's lair swung in a BL.
Valyrian steel cleaving shoulder to hip.
The corpse burst into shards of frost, the pieces evaporating before they hit the ground. Pain flared in Robert's side, old wound tugging like a hot wire. Yet he pressed forward, hammer whirling, clearing space for the men behind him. To his right, Robb Stark crashed shield first into a knot of whites, long sword flashing as gray wind. The great direwolf leapt into the fray, jaws closing around an undead ranger's spine and wrenching it in two. A piercing shriek cut through clash and cry, so high it rattled teeth. Arya, crouched atop a heap of broken ice blocks, saw the tallest walker raise his glass sword. Frost webbed down its arm. With a single stroke it sent a glory blue arc of energy whipping across the breach. The wave hissed along shields, icing metal instantly. Men screamed as fingers blackened. One Stormlander's arm shattered at the elbow, brittle as spun sugar, and he fell, sobbing. Arya's feet reacted before thought. She sprang, rolled behind a fallen timber, narrowly avoiding the cold flash that licked the ground where she had stood. Fire! Jon Snow shouted from the parapet, shaggy cloak snapping. Brothers heaved clay jars of lamp oil mixed with pitch over the battlements. At Jon's signal, torches rained down. Flame blossomed, orange and hungry. White ranks faltered, undead cloaks ablaze, the stench of burning rot sweeping up. Yet the White Walkers advanced unabated, glass swords glowing with inner frost. Three more stepped into the funnel of the breach, and Robert felt the temperature drop so sharply his breath crystallized before his eyes. Maester Luwin, further back at the supply carts, fumbled open a battered cask. Within lay a scattering of obsidian heads Samwell Tarly had shaped. "We've few left," Luwin warned Great John Umber, who accepted them with gruff nods, threading them onto spare shafts. "Make them count." Great John pushed to the line, bellowing an Umber war cry. He hurled one spear straight at the lead walker. The glass head pierced its chest in a silent bloom of shadow. Frost plumed outward like dying stars, and the walker fissured, first a crack at its breastbone, then a splintering cascade. The creature disintegrated into glittering shards, its destrier collapsing in the same heartbeat. For the first time that night, Robert heard an enemy sound like fear, a low crystalline chatter rippling through the remaining walkers. But fear was fleeting. They lifted arms in unison, and the ground itself convulsed. Corpses decapitated moments before clawed themselves upright. Severed limbs dragged splintered torsos. The dead did not care for damage. They answered only to the cold song of their masters. Robert's fingertips numbed on his hammer. He forced himself forward, bellowing curses to drown encroaching dread. Each strike a prayer to every god he had ever scorned. Hours blurred. Snow churned to pink slush under stamping boots. Flames guttered then died under gusts conjured by the walker's chill, until only moonlight showed the carnage. Mounds of withered flesh, broken shields, breathing men huddled around guttering embers. At last, just before dawn's gray promise, the walkers sounded a second shriek, shriller, rising like cracked flutes, and withdrew, bodies drifting into the treeline. Whites toppled where they stood, strings cut, leaving silence louder than battle. Robert braced his hammer against the ground, ragged breath rattling in his chest. Ned met his gaze across strewn corpses. Ice dripped black gore. Ned's eyes behind the steel of his helm shone with cunning calm. They were testing, he said. Testing our strength. Robert agreed, voice hoarse. Or testing something else. He looked east, where dawn painted the horizon a weak salmon. Testing how soon the sun will fail us, mayhap. They counted losses under sallow light. 130 men dead outright, another 60 wounded, 15 frozen beyond hope. Arya limped from the healer's tent, ankle twisted but eyes blazing. Rob's forearm was bandaged where blue frost had licked flesh to the bone. Jon Snow moved among brothers, clasping shoulders, murmuring steadies. He bled from a shallow cut above his brow where ice splinter had flown. Inside the common hall, they met at scarred trestles. Bowls of thin broth steamed, untouched. Eastwatch has fallen, Jon confirmed. I sent ravens again, but I fear none escaped. Ravens matter little now, Maester Luwin rasped. Dragonglass and fire are our feathers. All the dragonglass we possess sits in that crate, Samwell Tarly said, eyes huge. I've scoured every ruin, every cairn. Unless Dragonstone parts with its ancient hoard. Robert slammed fist to wood. Stannis will yield it if it costs him crown and keep. We have no time for his pride. Renly can carry the word south. He fixed Ned. Tonight taught us we can stem them, but not break them. We must strike first. Ned unscrolled a rough map Bran had drawn in charcoal. The Frostfangs looming like fangs, a black star marking a valley far beyond the Shadow Tower. Bran's wolf dreams point here. He says there is a heart of darkness, a forge where the walkers temper their cold. Destroy it, and their power falters. He tapped the star. Yet reaching it means marching for days beyond the wall, through territory they command. Great Jon snorted. Then we hammer straight north with every sword and hope the bastard chills remember our names. That will empty the wall, Bowen Marsh objected. If they flank us, they pour through elsewhere. The watch cannot hold alone. Robb leaned forward. Split our strength. Leave a garrison here, Stormlanders, some Northmen, Watch brothers. From the rest we form a vanguard to strike the Frostfangs. Fast, light, fueled by purpose. Arya's voice cut through. And ghosts. They looked to her. She held a shard of walker blade recovered from the breach. A sliver that had not melted but lay inert, leaching warmth from her glove. Steel breaks, she said. But this breaks steel. If we can melt it, reforge it. Maester Luwin frowned. Tobo Mott may coax new shapes from such crystal. But we lack forges here. Dragon fire, Sam murmured, then louder. A dragon's flame might temper it. He swallowed. Assuming there were dragons. Robert scratched beard. Rumor speaks of one black beast south in Valyria, and Daenerys Targaryen's trio across the narrow sea. None help us tonight. He eyed the shard. Yet we have flame of our own. He looked to Melisandre, as though conjured by thought. The Red Priestess had arrived with Stannis's raven the day prior, her crimson robes startling against snow. She stood at the hall's edge, pale hands folded atop her ruby choker. The Lord of Light kindled in me a vision, she said, voice rolling like distant thunder. A blade burning with coal-bright fury, wielded by a stag in a storm of wolves. Temper the ice of death in the fire of life, and you birth Lightbringer anew. Her eyes glowed ember red. Give me the shards. Give me Valyrian steel and dragon's glass. Give me blood to wake the forge. Robert met her gaze, fury clashing with wariness. You'll have no king's blood this day. She bowed slightly. Your will rules the realm of men, but in fire all debts are paid. They adjourned at dusk. Robert stalked to the wall's topmost rampart. From there the wilderness stretched white and endless under bruised clouds. Icicles daggered the parapet, and ghosts of fallen men seemed to drift just beyond vision. Ned joined him, silent for long minutes. Finally Robert spoke. If I fall, see Renly sits the Iron Throne. Ned's breath smoked. You will not fall. A laugh like ground stone. You're the only man alive who believes that. He looked sidelong. And if you fall?
Winterfell survives, Ned replied.
If snow must bury me, let it sprout direwolf pups from my bones. They clasped wrists, old oaths renewed without words. The forging took place beneath the wall in a disused cavern where fiery vents from deep magma had warmed stone for millennia. Melisandre directed brothers to erect a crude hearth from fallen blocks. Obsidian chips, the walker shard, splinters of shattered dragonglass arrowheads. All were poured into a crucible hammered out by Stormlander smiths. Over them Robert laid the broken mace of Ser Richard Horp, stout steel but cracked by walker frost. Ned added a dagger of Valyrian make, Ice's smaller twin, stolen once from a Braavosi pirate. Last came blood, prisoners taken in Cersei's aborted coup, shipped north in irons for judgment. Robert wrestled with conscience, but the Red Priestess assured him their crimes were grave, their veins eager to repent. As crimson steamed upon molten rock, shadow puppies snarled along cavern walls. Melisandre sang in Rhoynish, voice rising, braids whipping like flames. Heat thickened until none could breathe. Then, with a crack that shook stalactites, the crucible lit. Light like liquid sunrise poured out, coiling into a single serpentine stream that leapt onto the anvil. When it cooled, there lay a sword unlike any forged by mortal smith. Metal of burning orange at the core, fading to deep wine red at edges, its surface veined with black glass. Melisandre offered it to Robert, palms blistering but unflinching. Lightbringer, she whispered, forged anew in the night of winter's heart. Wield it, and let no darkness stand before you. Robert accepted. Sparks danced along the blade, tracing crowned stags that galloped then vanished. He felt strength surge up his arm, pain in his belly fading as though scar tissue drank heat and softened. Yet chill lingered about the edges of the flame steel, reminder of its birth in death's shard. Ned eyed it warily. A gift from a god with price unpaid. Let the bill wait, Robert muttered. We've foes to settle first. Departure came at first moonrise 2 nights later. They left Castle Black garrisoned by 300 men. Bowen Marsh, Maester Luwin, half the Stormlander levy, and a stout company of mountain clan spearmen who owed Ned blood from winters past. The vanguard, Eddard and Robert at its head, numbered 800. 500 Northmen led by Robb and Greatjon, 100 Kingsguard and Stormland Knights, 47 Brothers of the Watch under Jon Snow, and an eclectic band of spearwives and wildling scouts parted from their fleeing kin to fight for the living. Arya rode with them disguised in armor half her size, for not even Catelyn could pry her from this path. They followed the Milkwater first, then veered west through stands of dead pine that whispered under auroras like curtains of ghost fire. Cold deepened until beards froze to collars, breath crystals rattling in lungs. On the 3rd night, a blizzard swallowed their world. Tents shredded, fires choked. Through sheets of snow came faint clinks, the dead testing them again. But the army huddled around circles of dragon glass torches, each flame flicking blue. Lightbringer burned at the camp's center, Robert holding vigil beside it, blade thrust into ground like a lighthouse. Whites circled at edges but would not cross the fiery boundary. They lurked, waiting. At dawn, they broke from tents to find half their horses dead, tongues black from frost. They butchered the carcasses for meat. They could not afford pity, and trudged on, sleds hauling supplies. Snowdrifts rose higher than a man's head, but wildling guides found twists of path along granite ridges. Whenever Walker patrols approached, Jon Snow loosed ravens pinned with shards of glass. The birds burst into flames overhead, raining molten droplets that scattered the whites in confusion long enough for the column to slip past. On the 7th day, the Frostfangs loomed, jagged peaks sawtoothing sky, their flanks veined with ancient glacial rivers. At the mouth of a valley branched a circle of stones as tall as towers, engraved with glyphs half buried by snow. Bran's map had marked it, Heart of Darkness. They made camp among the stones, hollow wind echoing like voices. Ned walked the perimeter, palm upon hilt of ice. "Old magic sleeps here," he murmured to Robert. "I feel it in my teeth." Night fell swift, stars bright as pinpricks in black cloth. Fires burned low to avoid detection. Scouts returned one by one. Wildling Tala with arrow-scarred cheek. Ser Jacelyn Bywater -3 men. Finally Corrin Halfhand, face gray with frost. "Ice Keep," he rasped. "A fortress cut from the mountain's ribs rises beyond the gorge. Walls of blue so deep torches drown in them. At its heart stands a tree, dead, yet aflame with ice. Walkers guard every path." "How many?" Robb asked. "Too many to count." Corrin's mouth twisted. "Yet their numbers are not infinite. They pulse outward in patrols. A gap forms each dawn when one ring replaces another." Robert sheathed Lightbringer, orange glow winking out. "Then we strike at dawn. Secrecy over strength. I lead the hammer of the charge. Ned, take the flank with Jon. Find the tree if tree it be. Whatever spell feed these creatures springs from it. Burn it, break it, piss on it, I care not which." "Dragonglass arrows on the ramparts," Arya interjected. "I can climb the gorge walls unseen." "You're too small," Robb began. "Small enough to slip under their gaze," she snapped. Ned placed a hand upon her shoulder. She shook it off but subsided. The plan crystallized. 2 wings. Robert with the main force would storm the south gate, drawing defenders. Ned, Jon, and a wedge of spearmen would sneak along a frozen riverbed, ascend a fissure, and infiltrate to the Heart Tree. Melisandre and Sam would remain with reserves near the stone circle, prepared to light beacon fires if doom approached the camp. Dawn crawled across peaks purple-red. Snowflakes glittered diamond. The army crept into gorge shadows. Robert at front, Stag's Lair slung across back, Lightbringer in hand, flame-limbing mail with amber halos. His breath roared in ears. Blood thudded with old hunger. When they rounded a bend, the fortress unfurled. Walls curved like conch shells, translucent, veins swirling deep within. Gates carved of cross-hatched ice soared thrice the height of Winterfell's moats. Statues of pale warriors lined parapets, eyes sockets burning azure. Robert signaled. Great Jon and Umber axes moved to the front ranks. With a wordless roar they charged, boots crunching. Arrows of black fletch sang from ramparts. Dragonglass tips met shields. White archers reloaded with mechanical precision. Robert lifted Lightbringer. Its corona spilled across snow, melting drifts into hissing vapor. He hammered the gate with the blades flat. Ice screamed, spiderwebbing. A second strike and a third. Cracks raced like lightning, and with a thunderous groan the gate shattered inward. Whites flooded out. Steel clashed. Robert carved a path, blade leaving trails of steam, each cut sundering limbs, each thrust bursting dead hearts. Fire danced inside transfixed bodies, incinerating them from within. Men behind him shouted, emboldened. Yet a chill swirl descended. White Walker captains gliding along ramparts, arms raised. Spear tips of sapphire formed in midair and shot like javelins. One impaled Ser Darren Morrigan. Another pinned a mountain clansman to a column, freezing him solid before he could scream. Inside the gate Robert glimpsed a courtyard surrounding an inner tower. From its peak rose the tree. A withered weirwood, bark chalk white, branches armored in rime. but at its core pulsed a blue heart emitting cold flame. Runes girded its trunk, carved by hands no human possessed. Ned's task lay there. He fought toward a parapet staircase, clearing steps for archers. Above, Arya scuttled along ice gutters like a spider, unseen in the chaos. She strung a light bow gleamed from a wildling and notched an obsidian arrow. Breath steady, she sighted a walker whose helm sprouted curling horns. She loosed. The arrow vaporized one horn and lodged in temple. Blue light leaked, sputtering. The walker wheeled, eyes locking on her. Ice blossomed outward in a shield, but Arya was gone, slipping across roof tiles slick with frost. Meanwhile, Ned's column crept along the fissure beneath courtyard. Lanterns hooded, they advanced single file, Jon at the rear scanning footprints. Half a league in, the fissure widened into a catacomb of ice pillars. Within, whites trailed chains of black iron, dragging iron-bound crates that rattled with things alive. At Ned's sign, spearmen stabbed upward through pillar shadows, dispatching guards silently. Jon pried a crate open. A living infant's cry wafted out, echoing heartbreakingly. The babe's skin was pale, its eyes just turning blue. Ned's face collapsed to ruin. Craster's sons, he breathed, fury trembling. He lifted the child, swaddled it in his own cloak, and handed it to Sam. Take him to the rear. He lives. They pressed deeper and reached a spiral staircase of polished ice. Above, the blue glow of the heart tree seeped. They ascended into a chamber roofless to the sky, snow swirling overhead in tight vortices. The tree dominated the center, roots threaded through cracks like grasping fingers. Around it kneeled for white walkers robed in armor carved with constellations, chanting in a tongue of glass chimes. Blue flames coursed from their palms into the heart tree, which pulsed in response. Jon drew Longclaw, Valyrian blade black and hungry. Ned whispered, "We end them together." They charged from opposite flanks. Jon severed the first walker at the waist. Frost exploded. Ned's ice smashed into a second spine, but the blade lodged fast, ice gripping steel. The walker twisted, blade of chill erupting from its palm toward Ned's chest. Jon pivoted, interposed Longclaw, sparks of darkness meeting shards of winter. The clash rattled ribs. Longclaw cracked near the hilt. Before the walker could press advantage, Arya dropped from a beam above, dragonglass dagger downward. She drove it through the walker's eye. The creature screeched and collapsed, pulling ice free as it crumbled. Two remained. One turned on Arya, but Robb stormed up the stairs with gray wind by his side. The Direwolf tackled the walker, jaws closing around its arm. Frost spread across Grey Wind's muzzle, but Robb's axe cleaved the walker's neck, finishing the kill. Ned faced the last walker, a gaunt figure wearing a circlet of broken antlers. Recognition flickered. This one had led the breach assault. It leveled a spear at Ned's heart. Ned lunged, rolled aside as the spear thrust left a vapor trail. He hacked with ice. The walker parried with inhuman speed. Sparks of frost sang. They circled, and Ned's boots slipped on glazed stone. The walker thrust again, too fast. Suddenly Lightbringer interceded from behind, cutting the spear in half. Robert had reached the chamber, cloak blazing, rage incandescent. The walker staggered, and Ned seized the moment. Ice swept in an arc, helix of steam trailing, decapitating the creature. Head and body exploded into snow dust. Silence crashed. Only the heart tree's pulse remained, beating cold as outer space. Robert approached, Lightbringer humming. "If this roots their curse," he grunted, "let's yank it." Jon placed Longclaw's cracked blade against bark. Frost spidered around steel. "We need fire," he said. Robert plunged Lightbringer into the trunk. The metal bit, but the tree screamed, soundless yet rattling skulls. Blue fire erupted, rushing up blade, licking Robert's arms. He roared but held firm. Flames danced within sword as if eager to feast. He pushed deeper. Ned, Robb, Jon, and Arya laid blades against the roots, hacking. Every stroke drew a gout of shimmering sparks. The tree's heart glowed, swelling like a sun. Bran's prophecy whispered across Ned's memory. Direwolf and Stag Si. To Byside, he shouted, "All together!" They struck as one, Lightbringer, Ice, Longclaw, Needle, Rob's axe, metal and glass singing harmony. With a sound like a mountain cracking, the heart shattered, light flared, blinding. A shockwave of heat radiated out, hurling them against walls but thawing the very ice beneath their feet. Outside the fortress, whites convulsed, joints seizing. White walkers on ramparts froze mid-gesture. Blue lights blinked out of their eyes like candles snuffed. Robert's forces watched as enemy ranks collapsed into heaps of frost. In the chamber, silence reigned. Snow fell through roof onto steaming roots. Robert pulled Lightbringer free. Its glow dimmed to embers. He swayed, blood trickling from nose, but smiled at Ned. "Winter's bane," he rasped. Ned touched Robert's shoulder. Not yet finished, but the tide turned. They descended. Fires crackled as allies torched remaining undead husks. Great John hugged Rob, cackling. Stormlanders clasped wildlings in rough camaraderie. Melisandre arrived, eyes luminous. "The night shudders," she breathed. "What darkness you have slain will echo across centuries." Robert sheathed Lightbringer. "Echoes are for singers. We have living to save." They struck the fortress halls, rescuing 30 babes in iron cribs. 15 living wildlings kept as thralls. Even a few knights watched deserters chained as meat for gods. All were freed, fed, wrapped in furs. At dusk, they burned the fortress walls with barrels of wildfire Melisandre had conjured. Green flame dancing like serpents, melting ancient buttresses until towers collapsed in cascades of steam. That night, under clear sky spangled by northern lights, they buried their dead. Jon recited Night's Watch oaths. Ned offered words to the old gods. Melisandre sang for Lawler. Robert stood silent, one hand on the pommel of Lightbringer, the other pressed over his still-aching scar. He watched pyres blaze, their warm glow painting the Frostfangs golden, and thought of the boy he once was, bold and unbroken on the banks of the Trident. Destiny had dragged him through mire and decadence to this place, to cleanse him in fire and frost. He whispered a vow to remain worthy. In the quiet after chance, Arya approached carrying a shard of the heart tree she had pocketed. Crystal now dull, powerless. "Proof," she said. "So the southern lords believe." Robert smiled. "Let them keep their courts. We have walls to mend." He turned, raising his voice so all could hear. "Tonight we feasted on cold fear and spat it back aflame. But beyond this fortress, shadows remain. We march again south to freeholds besieged to rally realms. The Direwolf prophecy sets our course. We return to Winterfell, we fortify, and when winter's jaws open again, we meet them not here at the edge of the world but upon fields of our choosing." Cheers rippled, weary but resolute. Ned clasped Robert's wrist. Winterfell awaits. The column set out at dawn, bearing scars but hearts blazing. Jon rode beside Robert, Longclaw reforged overnight by Melisandre's flame. Break mended with glistening obsidian seam. "It feels lighter," Jon said. "Or you feel stronger," Robert grinned. Behind them sleds carried Craster's rescued sons, now bundled and babbling. Samwell Tarly kept watch, eyes gentle. Robb led the rearguard, gray wind limping but alive, muzzle swathed in salve. Arya scouted ahead with wildling spearwives, each step sure, needle dripping promise. Ned rode point, scanning horizon, cloak snapping the wolf's warning. Above, ravens wheeled, croaking in the cold light like heralds of dawn. As they wound back toward the wall, a hush fell, natural, not fearful. The land itself seemed relieved, mountains exhaling hoarfrost. Yet Robert knew this was but one battle in a war older than kingdoms. He felt Lightbringer's pulse, a slow heartbeat mirroring his own. Destiny linked them now, blade and bearer, fire and scar. He looked to Ned. "Think we've bought the realm time?" Ned considered. "Time enough for us to teach it hope." Robert laughed, deep and genuine, echoing between peaks. Somewhere far behind, the ruins of the ice keep smoldered under green and orange flame, sending pillars of steam spiraling into endless blue. Ahead lay walls of men, cities of intrigue, queens with venom tongues, and winters yet to break. But the stag marched beside the wolf, prophecy made flesh, and for the first time in years Robert Baratheon felt the world tremble not with dread but with the promise of a king's return. The wind chased them down from the frostfangs like some half-tamed ghost still hungry for heat. Days bled together in a white blur of silent ridges and black ice rivers until even the men of the watch, those lean shadows who had long since traded comfort for vigilance, began to mutter of never finding the wall again. But Robert Baratheon kept Lightbringer fixed at the head of the column, and its smoldering heart shed a faint copper glow that seemed to bend the blizzard aside. When rations ran low, Jon Snow sent ravens winging south with word for Castle Black to meet them halfway with sleds, and when the ravens did not return he tightened his cloak and pressed on without complaint. One night a skin-changer wildling named Rusk slipped into his snow wolf and loped ahead. He came back at dawn half-frozen but grinning round a bloody snout. "Found a herd of elk tangled in a drift," he rasped. "Meat enough for 3 days." Robert ordered spears and axes to carve the carcasses where they lay, and that evening campfires hissed with rich fat that spat against bronze kettles. Even the rescued babes cooed through chapped lips at the smell. They reached the wall on the 6th sunset. Castle Black's torch lines shone like slivers of ember through night fog, and horn blasts rolled across the plain in weary welcome. Bowen Marsh himself trudged out to greet them, brows iced, cheeks hollow. But when he beheld the children swaddled upon the sleds, tears melted rime upon his lashes. "9 hells and the Father's mercy," he breathed. "We feared you lost." "Lost," Robert barked, clapping snow from his pauldrons. "We've been sharpening our teeth." Inside the mess the survivors devoured stewed elk thickened with turnip and coarse barley. Afterward they sat ringed round braziers to hear the tale of the heart trees breaking. Brothers hooped when Arya described the walker's horns shattering beneath obsidian. Others crossed themselves in silent thanks when Ned spoke of the crying infants. Melisandre stood apart, ruby sending little rivers of red across vaulted beams. Yet even she permitted a thin smile when Jon lifted his cup and hailed Lawler for the forging of Lightbringer. Robert answered the toast with a wave of his mug. "I thank any god who puts steel in my fist." But afterward he beckoned Ned and Jon to a side table to plan the morrow. "Winterfell first," Ned said without preamble. "Cat will have heard only rumor. If we ride hard we may reach Moat Cailin in 6 days and Winterfell in 8. The boys must see their mother. And the North must see its king," Robb added quietly, leaning in, Grey Wind's great head resting across his boots. "If half the messages we intercepted are true, lords south of the neck hedge their loyalties again. My grandfather always said a sworn sword grows restless when he senses an empty saddle." Robert drained his cup and winced when the fresh scar tugged. "Then we'll fill saddles by the dozen. I'll not have Renly playing tourney king while we bleed in snow, but leaving him was necessary. He keeps King's Landing nailed shut till we return." He tapped the tabletop. "We ride daybreak. Jon, pick 20 of your best to escort those babes to the Shadow Tower. Let Dennis Mallister care for them till we decide what fate fits." Jon hesitated. "With respect, your grace, the children should be raised in warmth, far from the wall's bite. Old Nan's tales say such sons carry shadows in their blood." Robert studied him, then nodded once. "So we'll find them wet nurses in White Harbor. But for now they remain under guard." Plans spun deeper. Ravens to White Harbor and Carhold, orders to harvest every remaining dragonglass blade, commands for Garin irons, seed, cured pork. By midnight even Robert's chest burned with fatigue. He rose only when Ned muttered, "For hours rest or we'll be armor for the corpse fires ourselves." They left as dawn stained the sky bone gray. 800 riders stretched in arrowhead across the King's Road. Castle Black's remaining brothers saluted from the gatehouse, stark silhouettes atop white ramparts, and then the riders were alone again with wind and distance. Robert's breath plumed before his visor. Each hoofbeat jarred the half-healed ribs beneath his breastplate, yet every jolt seemed to hammer the memory of rot out of his marrow. He had never felt more alive. Not at the Trident, not atop the walls of Storm's End, not even in the warm, rum-scented nights of early rule when small folk cheered his coronation. Those days had been gilded heat without meaning. This snow-choked road, littered with broken dreams and silent promises. This was meaning. On the third day, they found the first holdfast raised by southern raiders. Charred beams, dead sheep frozen stiff among ashes. A girl no more than 13 nailed to the gatepost with her heart torn out and replaced by a doll of straw. "Bolton work," Great John muttered. Ned knelt to close the girl's eyes, then rose with jaw set like iron. Orders were given to bury the child and carve warning runes upon the fieldstones. The North remembers under Stag and Wolf. Robert lit the pyre with Lightbringer, and smoke roiled into low clouds shaped like antlers. That night, around a tight circle of fires at Queen's Crown ruins, they debated a new threat. Roose Bolton had withdrawn his banners from Castle Serwyn and was rumored to muster at the Dreadfort, claiming stark weakness under southern corruption. Rob's knuckles whitened on his mug. "If we march straight to Winterfell, we leave Bolton free to sweep the neck. He must be checked." "He will be," Robert assured. "But we move first to Hart, then to Limb. Once Winterfell is secure, we turn east. Teach Boltons the cost of flaying friends." He shot a glance at Ned. "And you'll house his prisoners in your dungeons. Even traitors deserve walls and chains over butcher tables." Ned's shoulders slumped in weary relief. 2 days later, the vanguard crested a low rise to see the Moat Cailin Causeway, choked with riders carrying Direwolf banners snapping black on gray. At their head rode Caitlin, stark astride a lean dapple mare, auburn hair whipping free beneath a hood. She reined in at sight of Robert, eyes bright with unshed tears. Behind her, bannermen flanked wagons piled with pitch barrels and crates of tinder. Every scrap of fuel Moat Cailin could spare. When the two lines met in slush, Caitlin dismounted first, dignity forgotten. She reached for Rob and Arya together, embracing them so fiercely Rob winced yet made no protest. Ned slipped down and folded arms round all three. Robert stood back, swallowing the bear growl in his throat, until Cat turned toward him with a smile wet as early rain. "Your Grace," she whispered. "Robert," he corrected.
"No ceremony."
"Not here." She nodded once, then surprised him by stepping forward and brushing a kiss to his cheek. "For saving my children. For bringing my husband home alive." A hush rippled through riders half expecting Robert Baratheon, old boar of rage, to bristle. Instead he blushed beneath frost-filmed beard and muttered, "Goddess protect us. Woman, you'll ruin my reputation." Laughter eased the tension, but only for heartbeats. Caitlin straightened. "We carry grim tidings, though. A raven reached us 4 nights past. Renly warns the Lannisters plot to spirit Cersei and Joffrey to Casterly Rock. Varys claims ships queue at Breakwater for a dawn sailing." Robert's jaw clenched. "I left Kevin to watch them, but if he turned," Ned cut in. "Kevin's honor is not in doubt. If the Kingsguard within the Red Keep move at Varys's whisper, even Kevin must yield." Ned's mouth tightened. "We cannot let the Queen slip west, else every Lannister sellsword in the Westerlands will flood King's Landing. We also can't abandon the North," Rob argued. "Bolton sharpens knives." Robert rubbed temples. The map unrolled in his mind like a bloody board. "Very well. We split again. Rob, Ned, and Caitlin take half our force to Winterfell. Secure grain stores, rouse the Umbrus lords. I ride south tomorrow with Selmy, Great John, and 300 mixed horse. We gallop for King's Landing, relieve Renly, and haul Cersei before a tribunal of lords. If Stannis wishes his Dragonstone hoard to stay intact, he'll keep tides clear." He raised palm to quell protests. "Lightbringer travels with me." Jon stepped forward. "Your Grace, let me join the southern host. My brothers trust me with the sword, and the wall will hold under marsh for a moon or 3. Robert eyed the boy. "No, man, now. You've earned your spurs, but your place is here in the north for the moment. Winterfell needs a watch liaison. The old gods chose you a bridge between black and gray. Be that bridge." Jon inclined his head, disappointment masked. Night deepened, strategies spun thinner. Melisandre promised to ride south with Robert. Sam begged leave to follow, scroll satchel bulging. The Citadel must record Lightbringer's return, he stammered. Robert snorted but agreed. By moonset torches guttered to embers, and each war party knew its dawn. The sun cracked the east red as liver when Robert mounted again, ribs screaming under fresh-laced plates. Selmy beside him looked every day his 60 years, yet sat a horse like men half his age. Great John, already singing some half-remembered bear dance dirge, slapped Robert's flank plate and roared, "King or ox, you'll eat southern dust, for I do." Robert laughed hard enough to cough blood. Coughed until Melisandre pressed a warm hand to his spine and murmured a Valyrian charm. Heat spread, steadying. He shot her a wary nod. "Keep your god close, but your lies closer." She smiled like dawn on spears. Truth burns brightest when death rides. They thundered south along the King's Road, a lean spear of smoke trailing dust. Ravens leapt ahead in pairs bearing ciphered orders. To Renly, to Stannis, to Mace Tyrell at Highgarden, promising royal pardon for swift muster of grain convoys. Robert had not signed a document in weeks. Quill's wasted time he no longer owned. Instead, Selmy carved each message's closing line with a small stamp Lightbringer heated. A crowned stag and direwolf entwined. Wax melted onto parchment like coiling flame and cooled to coal shapes. 300 riders devour distance like wolves. At midday they veered east toward the Trident. For the fords near Roughing Brook were rumored prowled by Sellswords turned bandits. Robert meant to clear them en route. His chest ached at memory of that river where Rhaegar's ruby had vanished, but he yearned to wash the stain of Walker's frost with honest, mortal blood. They found the brigands' evening of the second day. 200 ragged men in mismatched armor, banners torn from Tywin's depleted quartermasters, camped under a collapsed ferry tower. Robert ordered no parley. The charge hit like a vengeful stag bolting through wheat. Lightbringer cleaved the first shield with molten ease, sending sparks to kindle dry rushes. Battle lasted 9 minutes. When it ended, Glenmore's Sellswords lay dead among ruins, tower aflame, the riverbank glowing in twilight like fresh-coined copper. Selmy reported 5 wounded Stormlanders, none dead. Robert allowed the men Doppels of Arbor Red seized from the brigand stores, then kicked ashes into the coals and rode on. Later, while moonlight sluiced silver across meadow grass, Selmy eased his destrier close. "That zeal at the gate of ice," he said softly. "I saw once before, the day you split Rhaegar's breastplate." Robert wiped sweat. "Then I was young and love-mad. Now I'm old and world-weary. Difference enough. Perhaps," the old knight murmured, but worry nested in his pale eyes. At dawn of the 4th day, stony September loomed, smoke curling lazy from gabled chimneys. Robert was recognized at the south gate by a graybeard veteran who had thrown apples at Targaryen scouts during the rebellion. The man wept openly, pressed a carved stag antler into Robert's gauntlet, and whispered, "Long live Thunder." Robert pressed the token to his heart and swore the town tax-free for a year. By noon they galloped on. Messages met them before dusk. Ravens from Renly reporting the Red Keep still whole, but Varys vanished and Pycelle strangely ill, leaving Qyburn in the Grand Maester's tower. Cersei remained under guard, yet had attempted to bribe a Kettleblack to smuggle her decorative crossbow. Robert spat. "Would she shoot me again? I survived the boar, her quarrel'd be a tickle." At Bitterbridge, a Tyrell outrider in green and gold flagged them down. Warm chains glinted at his chest, sign of Maester status, though he rode like a Sellsword. "Words from Highgarden, your grace," he puffed. Robert broke the seal. Mace Tyrell pledged grain in return for clarification of future coronation status should Queen Marjorie be widowed while renegades sow sedition. Robert laughed so hard he near fell from saddle. He scrawled an answer across the maester's own saddle blanket. "The rose may bloom if rooted in honest soil. Plow loyalty first." He heated wax on Lightbringer's tip and stamped it. 2 dawns later they crested a hill south of the Blackwater Rush. The city lay ahead, roofs glinting pewter under winter sun. At the walls, green Tyrell banners snapped beside the royal stag. Renly's host guarded the gates. Robert reined in and signaled halt. "Selmy, ride with me. Great John holds the line until we parley." They clattered down the muddy slope under a flag of truce. Gatehouse arrows tracked them until a cry went up, "Open for the king!" Portcullis groaned. Renly emerged in gold filigree breastplate, cheeks leaner than Robert remembered, green eyes pinched. They clasped forearms, and Robert pulled him into a rough hug. "Still pretty as a painted saint," he growled. "But you've held this nest tight. Tell me Cersei still lives. I've a cell warmed just for her." Renly exhaled relief. "She lives, though not quietly. Tried to bribe half the guard, but Loras replaced them with Tyrell men. As for the city, Joffrey's conspirators rattle cages but cannot muster arms. Word of your hammer travels faster than the small folk can riot." Castle corridors echoed with whispers at Robert's return. Tyrell men saluted. Lannister guards scowled but obeyed Renly's edict. In the throne room, Robert halted before the iron seat, studying jagged edges once forged for men like him to fear. He laid Lightbringer crosswise upon the steps. "I'll sit later." They marched to Maegor's Holdfast, where Cersei, Joffrey, and Tommen were confined. The door banged wide. Inside, gold brocade draperies muffled a cold air heavy with resentment. Cersei lounged by the hearth in a robe of crimson wool, hair loose like molten gold. She rose when Robert entered, eyes bright with scorn. "So the boar failed. I am unsurprised. Gods indulge dull beasts." Robert stepped within a sword's length, no guard between them. "Your venom lost its sting," he said softly. "Your father's coffers cannot buy winter's mercy." He glanced at Joffrey. The boy flinched from his gaze. "I offer a bargain. Confess crimes before lords assembled. Regicide attempt, false heirs, treason. Do so and the High Septon will grant exile to Old Volantis. Refuse and dungeons will teach humility while Stannis sits your TR." "Eel." Cersei laughed, the sound brittle. "You speak of justice with a witch at your side and a bastard sword you name for gods you never honored. I honor the living." Robert turned away. "Dawn tomorrow, confession or chains." Outside, Renly waited beside Ser Loras Tyrell and Selmy. "She'll refuse," Renly predicted. "I would too," Robert admitted, surprising them. "Pride's a blade arrests reason." He rolled shoulders. Pain pulsed but dulled. "Let her rot till reason thaw." Through the next week, Robert sat the Iron Throne daily, flanked by Selmy and Renly, hearing petitions. Great John often stood behind, fists on hips, terrifying sycophants. Samwell recorded every decree on fresh vellum. Release of grain to northern garrisons, abolition of Lannister coin tithe on smiths, pardons for Night's Watch deserters who returned north within a moon. Street gossip turned grateful. Bakers returned to stalls, and flea-bottom mothers named swaddled sons Eddard in hushed hope. But winter's broader war intruded. Ravens from Ned reported Bolton banners advancing on Winterfell under darkened moon, Karstarks rallying in defense. "Skirmishes each night," Ned wrote. "My presence steadies walls, yet Roose plays subtle. Most men still fear crossing into traitor's blood if lines remain blurred." He begged Robert to send either royal decree or fresh men. Robert summoned counsel. Renly argued for negotiating with Bolton through hostage trade. Selmy urged immediate punitive march. Melisandre offered darker counsel. Shadow binds shadow. Cut the lord, free the skin. Robert silenced her. In the end, he dispatched Great John north with 200 Crown's Guard and signed an edict stripping Roose Bolton of title unless he bent knee in person before the New Year's first full moon. He sealed parchment under flame and prayed the wolf's shadow outran the flayers. Meanwhile, Stannis answered none of Robert's letters. Dragonstone remained shuttered behind storms. Yet galleys bearing obsidian ingots began landing at Driftmark, crews claiming secret purchase by an unnamed benefactor. Renly suspected Stannis sought to court Jon Connington's exiles across the narrow sea. Robert paced ramparts under gray drizzle, wondering how many brothers he must bury before war's end. On the 9th morning after his return, a breathless Tyrell page brought a scroll sealed with a direwolf, urgent from Winterfell. Robert snapped string and read aloud to council. Bolton refuses summons. His forces camp 10 miles east, blotting horizon with flayed man standards. Scouts report Carhold men desert nightly, unwilling to shed northern blood. Winterfell stands but morale frays. We require king's presence or Lightbringer. I fear Roose will strike before moon sets thrice more. Ed. Robert closed eyes. He could see Ned's weary frown between each line. He slammed fist to map table, rattling cups. We ride north at dawn. Renly stepped forward. Let me remain to hold the city. Robert gripped his brother's shoulder. You have the people's ear. Keep it. But if war spills south, send word and sail east to hire the Braavosi fleet. I'll repay iron with gold. Selmy bowed. I ride with you, sire. So do I, said Sam, voice squeaking. Robert raised a brow. Sam gulped. The wall taught me one lesson. Historians must follow battles, roar, else cowards will pen the victor's lies. Then keep up, Tarly, Robert chuckled. Wear lighter robes. Preparations whirlwind. Tyrell grain barges loaded for Gulltown, when smaller carts could race the inland trails. Melisandre gathered red priests newly arrived from Volantis. Their flame-tattooed palms itched to witness prophecy unfold. Robert tolerated them so long as they carried tinder and pitch. The host rode again 2 mornings later, this time 400 strong. Selmy's Kingsguard, Tyrell outriders, 20 young Stormland nobles eager for glory. A company of Dothraki sellswords Renly had purchased cheap after their call died of plague at the docks. Robert eyed them warily but admitted their skill at lightning raids. The Blackwater's ferry chain rattled open, and hoofs thundered north. Winter deepened. Icicles hung like daggers from pines. Robert's sleep grew troubled. Dreams of the heart tree bleeding blue flame across fields of ash where children cried with walker voices. Each dawn he woke with frost-crusting beard from breath and rode harder to silence echoes. Selmy watched in silence, hand never leaving hilt. Near the neck they encountered refugees. Small folk from the Barrowlands, entire families bearing goods on sleds. They spoke of Bolton outriders pillaging hamlets, forcing levy service, flaying prisoners and hanging skins as banners. One gaunt woman fell sobbing at Robert's horse. My man would not kneel. They took his face. Robert ordered every refugee escorted behind vanguard and doubled pace. On the 12th day, Winterfell's watchfires winked through sleet. Smoke rose beyond the eastward rise, Bolton's encampment. Robert's heart hammered louder than any war drum. Wolves howled across the snows, answer to some silent moon. The battle for the North Soul lay before him. He galloped for the gatehouse where Ned and Robb awaited atop the ramparts. Snow rimed their beards. Gray cloaks snapped. The reunion was terse, purposeful. Ned pointed beyond the outer field. Roose entrenched along the ridge beneath Deadwood. 5,000 men but half conscripts. Robert nodded. We break his line before dawn. Show these conscripts the king they serve. That night Lightbringer burned upon Winterfell's gods would alter. Melisandre chanted while Bran, pale, grown thin in silence, watched from his wicker chair, eyes white as blown snow. Afterward the king addressed gathered lords in the great hall. His voice rang against stone. The lion in the South Claw's walls will mend. The walker in the north we have wounded. Now a flayed man thinks to claim your hides. Look to your banners. They bear wolves, mermen, flints, reeds, symbols of families tempered in winters that broke empires. I am Robert of House Baratheon, sworn brother to Eddard of House Stark. Together we bled for freedom at the Trident. Tonight we bleed again, but this time we carve not a dragon but a coward who skins kin. At dawn we ride, we hammer, we howl. And when the sun sets it shall gild only dire wolves and stags, not flayed pink carrion. Roars shook rafters. Mead splashed like summer rain. In the corner Arya sharpened needle, eyes reflecting Lightbringer's soul fire. Dawn crawled cold and white. Fog hugged the Deadwood Ridge, muffling banners. Robert's host formed in 3 wedges. Center under Robert and Selmy wielding heavy cavalry. Left flank under Great John with Karstark remnants and wildling skirmishers. Right flank Ned and Robb leading foot and Grey Wind. Archers strung along parapets to provide covering volleys. Bolton's line waited silent, shields black, flayed men pink and dripping stitched across banners. Roose himself sat atop a grey courser, cloak lined with pale human skin that fluttered like parchment. He raised a gauntlet in greeting, mouth thin as knife slit. Robert answered by lowering his visor. The horns blew. Snow exploded under hooves. Robert's hammer led. Fog shredded, revealing pikes leveled. But the Karstark deserters among Bolton's men wavered at sight of stark Direwolf approaching. Robert bellowed, "North remembers!" and crashed into pikes. Lightbringer sheared iron like bread crust, melting points. Selmy swept left with white cloaks blazing. Greyjohn's axes stormed flank, howling. Arrows rained from Winterfell's walls. Dragonglass tips mixed with bronze, each shaft whistling vengeance. Bolton's conscripts buckled. The Dothraki sellswords tore through rear ranks, Arrak's flickering. Within minutes Bolton's left wing collapsed like rotted timber. Men fled across drifts, dropping spears. Roose rode forward, pale eyes unreadable. He raised a horn to summon reserve knights, but an obsidian arrow sprouted in its bell. Arya Stark stood on a toppled oak stump, bowstring humming. Bolton wheeled, saw her, and for the first time emotion cracked his mask. Fear or rage. He spurred to charge her, but Grey Wind barreled from side, jaws clamping horse's throat. The animal toppled, shrieking. Roose rolled free, slashing dagger of Valyrian steel, but Robb's longsword met it mid-arc, sparks flew. They fenced amid mist while wolves ripped dying mounts around them. Then Ned stalked in, ice raised two-handed. Bolton parried once, twice, but the great sword battered him to knees. Robert arrived last, dismounting with rib-cracking grunt, and pressed Lightbringer's edge beneath Bolton's chin.
Surenner, Ned commanded.
"You've spilled enough northern blood." Roose's lip bled. He glanced at glowing blade, then at retreating banners. "Mercy from a wolf?" he hissed. "Mercy from a king," Robert corrected, drawing sword back. "Swear fealty. Swear by every soul you flayed, that night's dark matters more than northern pride. We need men alive for wars greater." Bolton's eyes flicked to the horizon where, faint even in daylight, a shimmer of pale curtain rippled. Aurora of the Walker's realm, reminder winter yet watched. Slowly he sank full to knees, dagger falling. "I, Roose of House Bolton, yield to King Robert Baratheon," he rasped, "and to Eddard Stark, Warden of the North." Cheers rose like thunder through snow. Riders clashed weapons on shields. Archers loosed victory shafts into sky. Robert exhaled, pain flaring. A reminder he was mortal still. He sheathed Lightbringer and pulled Bolton to his feet. "First order of fealty. Burn these flayed banners. Stitch new ones. Gray and black, wet with no man's blood." Bolton stared, then nodded once. That night Winterfell's courtyard roared with celebration. Fires blazed high enough to melt eaves. Children chased each other between lumbering soldiers. Jon Snow leaned beside Sam, watching Bran smile for the first time in moons as Hodder hoisted him to see dancing shadows. Melisandre paced alone near the Godswood, eyes fixed northward toward stars. Robert walked ramparts with Ned. Below them, Karstark and Bolton men shared loaves. "This," Robert said quietly, "might be the kingdom I wanted. Not gold roads and fat merchants, but comrades who bleed together then mend each other's wounds." Ned shook head fondly. "You wanted ale and song, as I recall." "I still do," Robert laughed. "But first," a horn blasted thrice from the west watchtower.
Instant huche.
Every head turned. The third blast, signal for White Shadows, had not been used since Legion days. Robert's stomach clenched. They raced down spiral stairs into courtyard where sentries pointed beyond battlements. On the horizon, a wall of black cloud rolled, streaked by flashes of sickly blue. Outlines like antlers, no frozen trees, no impossible, moved within. Jon's voice trembled. "The night's wind. It follows." Robert drew Lightbringer. Its flame burned brighter than ever, reflecting in Ned's steel eyes. The king squared shoulders, hammered hilt against breastplate, and shouted so every soul from stable boy to former Bolton turncoat heard, "Then let winter come. We have hearths enough for every ghost that howls." Snow began to fall. Not soft this time, but sharp as ground glass, and the direwolf howled again from somewhere within Winterfell's stones. Men gripped weapons, children scurried to mothers, and Robert felt no fear, only fire, as the north stirred to meet its destiny beneath a sky where red dawn embers already licked the edge of night.